Blockbuster, the winner of Adweek's Creative Podcast of the Year, returns.
Film is a hobby, not a career.
I know, Dad.
James Cameron? James Cameron.
A movie for your ears.
James Cameron.
What, me? No.
This isn't what I envisioned.
It's a bad idea, okay?
About the world's most ambitious filmmaker.
It has to be perfect.
Just say, I'm the king of the world.
What? Why would I yell that?
Blockbuster. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Shelved Film Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Meyer. I just want to apologize for the sound of my voice right now. As I am recording this, I am just coming off of a bad cold and sinus infection. So it's been a little bit of a rough week for me, but need to get the intro in. So today's episode is one that I had a lot of fun with, and one that I was kind of sitting on the opportunity for a while. Wasn't sure if it was going to make it happen, but I decided to reach out to a friend of mine who knew the person that I am talking to today to see if they would be interested in coming on my podcast. And I guess I don't need to beat around the bush because you can see it in the title. Today I am talking to film director Dwight Little, or sometimes as he's credited, Dwight H. Little. He's probably most known for directing the fourth Halloween movie, The Return of Michael Myers. He also directed a number of other films. He worked on a Steven Seagal movie, which was really interesting to hear his opinions on Steven Seagal. Actually, I'm trying to remember which movie that was that he directed. Marked for Death. He did the Steven Seagal movie Marked for Death. He also did Murder at 1600, a Wesley Snipes political thriller that I had remember seeing a long time ago and enjoying as a kid. He worked with Brandon Lee before he passed away. We talk a lot about that. But the main reason I actually wanted to talk to him was because he directed a video game movie, and one that I actually enjoy for whatever reason, because a lot of people say all video game movies are bad. There's a couple good ones, blah blah blah. I have a very interested position on video game movies. I watch almost all of them. I will find things to enjoy in some that most people would just write off. But he actually directed the Tekken movie, and I actually really enjoy the first Tekken movie. There actually was a straight-to-DVD sequel that I did not see and did not really have any interest in. But he did do the first one that I really enjoy, and so that was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to talk to him. I really wanted to talk to him about working on a video game movie. And, unfortunately, our time was a little limited, so I didn't get to ask all of the questions I wanted to ask. But, he had a really interesting career, so there was a lot to talk about. In the short time we had, I did manage to have a really fun and interesting conversation with him, and he did agree to come back, because we did talk about his Brandon Lee movie, which is one of the ones I didn't get to see, because I tried to watch as many of his movies as I could before we started, and that one I just didn't get to see, and he was like, oh, well, when you finally see it, we'll come back and do it again. So hopefully we'll get more time together. I really enjoyed talking to Dwight. He was a super nice guy, super gracious for him to do that. So without further ado, I'm not going to waste any more time, so let's get the stuff we need to get out of the way. Be sure to follow us on all the social medias, Twitter and Instagram at Shelved Podcast. We also have the Patreon, patreon.com/shelved, with a lot of new great rewards on there, so be sure to check that out. Rewards starting as low as $1 a month, so if you got $1 to spare, it's one of the best ways to help the show. And you can also check out our merch store at blowthecollar.com. Search for the Shelved Film Podcast. We got some t-shirts and a mug on there if you want a mug. So, yeah, be sure to check that out, and I hope you enjoy our interview with Dwight Little.
But yeah, so I just wanted to start off by thanking you for agreeing to do this. You know, it's something you didn't have to do, and I always appreciate when people take their time or take some time to come, have a little chat.
Oh, good. Happy to do it.
Yeah, and hope you're staying safe and sane with everything going on.
Yeah, I'm over safe personally, but I got it. I thank you for that, though.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. It's better safe than sorry in this situation. Yeah. So I mean, So I figure we'll just jump right into it. There's so many things I would love to talk to you about. I feel like there could be many podcasts on many of the projects you've worked on over the years. But I just wanted to do, just to really quickly, just how you got into film and what your first directing job.
Well, there's the very early interest that came in Super 8 filmmaking going all the way back to high school, and I won a couple local film festivals in high school, so that gave me a little bit of encouragement. And then I was looking around for colleges, and at that time there was really only three. There was NYU, there was USC, UCLA. There wasn't a bunch of film schools really the way there are now, and I was very fortunate to get into USC. So once I got into USC, then I treaded water for 2 years like everybody else doing the undergraduate work, and then was able to jump in, and then was able to make a film at USC, a student film, which was written up in the Hollywood Reporter and got some attention, and that did help me get going.
Yeah. So what was it like, kind of getting your first directing job? Sorry, I had the name of your first film here, but I seem to have lost it.
Well, it's a very, it's one of those very quirky, crazy stories where I was hired initially by an old school B movie producer named Sandy Howard, and his movie Triumphs of a Man Called Horse with Richard Harris was short. He only had 82 minutes, and he needed to deliver 90 minutes to the foreign buyers to get money on his pre-sales. And so he didn't have any money left, so he had me come in, and we came up with a scheme where we would do a 4-minute opening title sequence with a rider going basically from Boston out west, from right to left, across the screen. And then at the end of the movie, he goes back to Boston, left to right across the screen. Of course, we didn't have the actors, so I had to double the actor, and drove around Arizona with a station wagon and an Airy, and we would rent cowboys and horses wherever we were. So it was a crazy story of just trying to put together 8 minutes of film that he could use, and he had an old Rita Coolidge song from another movie that he had the rights to, so they were able to play the song over the titles. And in any event, when it was all cut together, then he was able to deliver 90 minutes of movie and get payment on all of his deposits. So he was, and the whole thing was done for about, I don't know, maybe $10,000. I don't know, maybe not even.
Yeah.
And he was very, very grateful, and then offered me a movie because VHS was really coming onto the scene at that moment. So all those new companies were popping up, and they needed movies for the video stores. There was Hollywood Video, there was Blockbuster, there was 2020. They were all needing movies.
Yeah.
And so there was an appetite for very low budget movies. So he said, "What can you make for me for $300,000?" And I had an idea based on a documentary I had done about spies in Southern California. And I pitched him the idea, and he immediately said, "Well, I'm going to make the poster right now. I need the script." And I said, "There is no script." and he said, "Well, get me one right away." And I said, "Well, I can't quit my two jobs because I had an unlicensed real estate job, and I had a job in a brokerage house just to try and, to pay for my rent.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you need to quit those jobs right away because I need the script." So that was pretty scary. And so I quit my jobs, and even though I really don't think of myself as a writer, it was just I just was, my back was up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote this Kgb the Secret War. It ended up being called, and we did make it with Sandy Howard. For a very small amount of money. We got Sally Kellerman and Walter Gotell, who was famous from the James Bond movies, and Michael and Sarah, who had been a big TV actor back in the '60s. A strange group of people. But anyway, we did get it made, so that got me a credit anyway.
Yeah. I love stories like that. I heard Edgar Wright, when he did his first movie, it's like they were a few minutes short. You said it had to be 90 minutes, and they're like, "Oh, just make the credits run really slow," and that was like their way of padding out the time.
Well, this was a lot. I mean, it was like 8 minutes is a lot of screen time.
Yeah, and the work on your first movie reminds me a lot. I just watched that documentary about Canon Films not that long ago. And,
oh, right.
Yeah, which is an amazing documentary if anyone hasn't seen it. But the way they would sell movies on the poster, and then that's how they would get their funding to go make the movie, sounds like a little similar there.
What's the name of that movie?
It's called Electric Boogaloo, the story of Canon Films or something.
Oh, yeah. Is that just on YouTube, or where'd you find it?
I actually found it at a dollar bin at a dollar store, but
okay.
it was getting a lot of traction out there, and it's a fascinating story just because the way that company operated. I highly recommend it.
Well, I worked for one of the co-founders of Canon. His name was Menachem Golan.
Oh, yeah. He's name dropped many times in that documentary.
Yeah, so I did the Robert Englund version of Phantom of the Opera, and he produced that, and he had just left Canon Films. He and his cousin Yoram Globus split up, and Menachem went off to start his own company, and we did a kind of a horror version of Phantom of the Opera with Jill Schoelen and Robert Englund, and shot it in Budapest, and it was quite an exciting adventure. We didn't do a lot of business with it, but it's been reconsidered. Let me put it that way. There was a Blu-ray re-release of Phantom of the Opera, and we were getting these really, really nice reviews. But 25 years later, when we came out, it was considered kind of a rip-off of the, Andrew Lloyd Webber stage version, and everybody thought we were just kind of poaching off the title, which of course we were. And, but nevertheless, it's been very interesting to watch that film go from being kind of a critical and commercial flop to now I get more questions about it than almost anything. So it's strange how time changes people's perceptions.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes movies just don't find their audience when they come out, and like Last Action Hero is one of my favorite movies, but that movie was like a bomb when it came out. But I look at it as like it was a movie just very ahead of its time.
Well, people forget that Fight Club was a big miss when it came out. And there's some quite, well-known titles that we think of as being big successes, but they weren't.
The Thing is another one of those.
Oh my God, The Thing was crushed John Carpenter. It just broke his soul because I believe he knew it was a very good film, and Kurt Russell knew it was a good film. And it just missed so badly, and everybody just knows kind of now that it's a classic, but it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, I mean, me of the younger generation, I always just knew that movie like, oh, it's like a horror classic. And then when I start getting interested in film and look into it, I'm like, wait, that was like they really ripped that movie apart? Like, it's crazy.
And Bonnie and Clyde too was just just ripped to shreds. until then they had to re-release it. So it's a very interesting thing, and then a lot of movies that are big successes when they come out, they kind of fade quickly. It's like you think of Love Story with Ryan O'Neal and Ali McGraw. What a huge sensation that was, and then 30 years later, people don't really talk about it much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about like the time and place of a film, and some films are timeless, but others they kind of come and go with the time.
Well, Crash, I think, is really the perfect example where it caught such a wave, and even going so far as to win the Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody just doesn't want to watch it. I don't know.
I never understood that because I saw that movie in a bubble. Like I kind of just stumbled across it and I watched it and I was like, oh, that was like a really great movie. And then years later, I hear everybody trashing it, and I'm like, what? Like I didn't understand that. And I think everybody was just bitter because it beat Brokeback Mountain was what it was.
Right. There's always that. I think Green Book was picked on for that reason too.
Yeah.
It beat Roma or whatever. But anyway, so my to go back to your question, when I got out of film school, I really, really scrambled and hustled. I worked for a little TV news station out here. Well, not little, but it was KABC, and they had a magazine show called INLA. So I did little 5-minute pieces about panda bears or rollerbladers. It was like one of those after the news magazine shows.
Yeah.
And then I did like a kind of an after school special educational thing, which was a dramatic film, and again, just living hand to mouth. Kind of, I did 1 or 2 small music videos that didn't go anywhere. But just trying whatever until it wasn't until I did that job for Sandy Howard that it sort of led to something.
Yeah. I mean, you're doing the work, trying to just hustle and get whatever you can.
That's right. And then at the same time, you have to somehow keep some food on the table. So
yeah.
So unless you have a trust fund or some kind of passive income, you got to figure out how to keep going.
Yeah. So I want to talk about. So you mentioned Robert Englund, and just like looking at all the films you've done, you've worked with a lot of great actors, character actors, and things of that nature. I watched a couple of your films in preparation for this. One being Murder at 1600. Which I had not seen in years, and I forgot, like, oh, there's like a lot of, Wesley Snipes, everybody knows is like the star, but like Alan Alda and,
right.
all the people who are in that movie. Like, what is it like working with some of these big stars? Like, 2 of the ones I'm most curious about being Wesley Snipes and Steven Seagal, because you kind of worked with these guys at like the heights of their careers.
Well, don't forget the great Diane Lane, too.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But, let's start with Steven, because he's really the reason I got a leg up in the business. I made the 4th Halloween movie, as you know, Halloween 4.
Yes.
And that movie was brought to his attention, and to this day, I don't know how. But I guess it had been number 1 at the box office, so it got some attention. And
I think it's still widely considered one of the better Halloween sequels.
Yeah, it's held up very, very well.
Yeah.
And it plays, of course, every year, and it's I've been to 1 or 2 of the conventions, and people, are really, really fans of that particular movie, so that's gratifying. But he saw it, and he called me in for a meeting because he was looking for a director. He had only made 1 movie. It was called Above the Law.
Mm-hmm.
And he called me in because he wanted to make this movie called Hard to Kill. And, I interviewed with him for it, and it was quite an interesting meeting where, he pulled out a handgun and put it on the desk. It was kind of funny. I mean,
Yeah.
not in a threatening way, but he just, I guess it was in his back and making him uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And when I went into the office, he was speaking fluent Japanese on the phone, so I immediately knew that not everything about him was a complete hype. There must be some truth to it, because very few action movie stars speak fluent Japanese.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting to walk into the room and hear him speaking Japanese. I was like, oh my God, this is real.
Yeah.
So, and then I also was able to experience his marksmanship on several cases, and of course, watched him give his Aikido dojos and do his instructions. So, Stephen has an ego and he's a bit of a narcissist, but it is real. It's not fake.
He's living the gimmick, you might say. Like,
he what?
Like living the character because he is this actor who kind of has like a character about, like, everybody knows who he is, but just like that's who he is at all times. He's not like putting it on.
No. He's that guy. He came up and he went to Japan. He became a black belt in Aikido. He taught in a very, in that world, and he then taught Michael Ovitz. He's very proficient with guns and firearms, and so anyway. But it turned out that Warner Brothers, had no interest in me directing Hard to Kill, because they had another director in mind who had done a big studio movie with Stallone and Rutger Hauer. I'm trying to remember the name of that movie. But they wanted this director, and so that didn't work out. But about a year and a half later, he wasn't happy with how it had come out, how Hard to Kill had come out. And so he was going to make a movie outside of Warner Brothers at 20th Century Fox, and then he called me back in. So it was on the second go-around where he kind of stuck with me, and then the people at 20th Century Fox, they weren't too interested in me either. Stephen, at that point, he really put his foot down and said, no, I'm going to go with this guy. And so without that kind of, leverage, I don't think I ever would have gotten my shot. So I owe a lot to Stephen, and I always speak highly of him because, he had a lot of, he doesn't just bend with the wind. If someone tells him no, he doesn't just give up just because someone said no.
And it seems like at this time he must have had a lot of pull.
Well, Hard to Kill was a surprise hit, and so he had some leverage coming off of Hard to Kill.
I want to get to your work with Wesley Snipes in a minute, but there's a little movie in between there that this was one I tried to get to before this interview, but unfortunately I didn't get to watch. But I did look up some clips on YouTube. But The Crow is one of my favorite movies, so I was just kind of curious what it was like working with Brandon Lee.
Well, it's funny because Rapid Fire really is played in very heavy rotation on cable television, so it's had a wonderful life. It was also not a hit when it came out. I got that film after Marked for Death, and Brandon was a very wise beyond his years, intuitive, smart guy who was aware that he was wrestling with his father's legacy. And he was very clever about it because, he put in his contract that the studio would not be able to say ever, son of Bruce Lee. He just refused.
Oh, that's great.
He refused to let them do that. So that was an ironclad thing. And yet, being clever, the studio was able to, imply that without saying it directly.
Yeah.
Because that was, to be fair, that was the marketing hook, right?
Of course.
It was Brandon Lee, but he so stood out on his own. He was funny, really, really funny, and we got a little bit of that acerbic humor into the movie. You should watch the movie.
I really plan on it. I just, between my day job and the thing, it was like the one I didn't get to, and I was like, oh, I really want to watch this. But
it's very entertaining, and there was no doubt that Brandon was on his way. I mean, they came to us, the producers of The Crow, and they said, we really need to see because we were just still with a rough cut and temp music. We weren't finished, and they said, we need to see. Would you show the movie? And of course, the studio was very concerned about showing the movie. It wasn't finished, and they came to me, and I said, look, I'll run it for you in a room, but you have to tell me who's going to be there. It's got to be very limited.
Yeah.
And then you guys have to just do a shake hands non-disclosure agreement that you'll just love the movie or hate it. You'll just keep it to yourself. And so I think Ed Pressman did come, and maybe a couple other people, a manager and an agent, but there's just a few people. And we screened the movie for them in a rough form. And, of course, they immediately booked him for The Crow because they could see that he was going to be the next guy.
Yeah. To me, it's always one of the biggest missed opportunities with actors of like, just like the things he could have done. Like, he probably would have been one of our biggest action stars of the 90s.
Well, first of all, he would have been, probably in all the Lethal Weapon movies. He would have been in every, he would have been in one of the universes. He would have been either in the Marvel or the DC universe.
For sure.
With a very substantial part. So, to be an Asian action star, I mean, Hollywood would be tripping over themselves. To put him in what we now see as these universe series. But he was definitely an artist too. He didn't want to just do, commercial stuff. He he was interested in building himself out as more of an actor. A very interesting man. And of course, what happened there, and I think I've unraveled what happened there, but it's the odds of it are so beyond comprehension that's why everybody wonders what was really involved. But in fact, that load that was stuck in the barrel hit him in the chest exactly in the main artery, and he was out within 5 or 7 seconds. He was unconscious. It happened so fast.
Oh, it was a horrible. It's something I still think about to this day. Like that movie really resonated with me. Like when I first saw it as a child, I watch it like once a year or so. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say, he was, I think we all know that Brandon was on his way to superstardom, and I think he would have handled it. He was not somebody who was going to just do, coke and strippers and burn out. I mean, he was very mature.
Yeah. And there's plenty of interviews that I've seen with him. He seemed, he's very charismatic, seemed like he had a good head on his shoulders, and just would love to have seen what he could have accomplished. Yeah.
So anyway, that was a wonderful opportunity to work with him, and then also a very sad story in the end.
Yeah. I want to get to these last couple of points because I know you have to get out of here at a certain time. But I just watched Murder at 1600, which I really enjoy. I was a big Wesley Snipes fan when I was a kid, and this was a movie I always remembered but hadn't seen in years. And I love a good thriller, and was like when rewatching it, I was surprised, like, oh, it's like a lot more action than like in your typical thriller.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there was an interest in White House political thrillers because the Tom Clancy universe existed at that time. The Clear and Present Dangers and Patriot Games and Executive. What was the one that Harrison Ford did? Anyway, there was kind of a genre at that point, and the script was actually not written for an African American lead. It was written, because Warner Brothers was looking for a vehicle. They had a stable over there, of goats. There was Gibson and Costner and Eastwood and Stallone and a lot of them just.
A lot of the older actors.
Well, they weren't older then. But
well, yeah.
But there were at that time there were a lot of middle-aged white leading man action stars, and they wanted to keep them in movies. So when the script came to me, it came to me because of Free Willy 2, oddly enough, because that was at Warner Brothers as well. But when the script came to me, I read it and I thought that it was a little dull. It was kind of it was an interesting premise, obviously, but it was a little dull, and I wanted to make it more of an action movie and more, just kind of amp up the genre part of it. And I spent a lot of time on the script, and then when I got to talk to Wesley, he agreed that first of all, Wesley's comfort is in action, even though he's a great dramatic actor. But I actually think he's happier when he's fighting than when he's acting,
and it shows, honestly.
Yeah, but there was another weird coincidence there because he was sent off to North Africa to do a movie with Van Damme. It was going to be a two-hander with Wesley Snipes and Jean-Claude Van Damme, and they were prepping the movie, and something happened. And one. What's that? I'm kind of blown away by what you're saying right now, thinking of those two in a movie together. Yeah, wouldn't that be a great movie? And for some reason, the politics or the personality, something went very wrong.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers shut the movie down. And everybody came home from, I think they're in Morocco. And so now Warner Brothers is sitting there with a $10 million pay-or-play deal with Wesley Snipes, plus his perk package, and either they better make a movie with him or they're going to have to pay out that money and have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
So anyway, they started looking through all their development, and somebody said, well, what about this? It was at that time it was called executive privilege. What about this? And who's the director? And they said, okay, we know Dwight because he did Free Willy 2. And so let's see if we can retool it for an African-American lead. And, they then sent me to New York to meet with Wesley. But I was in the executive's office, and he said, would you do this with Wesley Snipes? And I hadn't really thought about it with an African-American. And then I just said to the executive in the room, I said, Black man, White House. And he stood up out of his chair and he goes, oh, my God. He said, that's it. That's the movie. I said, I know. And then after all that enthusiasm, they even had posters that said Black man, White House, but they got shut down because it was too controversial.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a great log. They should have gone with it. I thought it was such a great log line.
Yeah, that is actually really good. Sorry, I know we're coming up on the edge of our time here. I just wanted to, if I could, because one of the whole reasons I wanted to talk to you is because you worked on a movie that I'm a fan of, and it's in a genre that I'm a fan of, which is the video game movies. So I just wanted to talk to you about Tekken, which I really enjoy.
Well, it has a few admirers, and thank you for being one of them. It's a very troubled movie. The producers got into some financial troubles. the schedule was sort of whittled down while we were shooting, and at one point we were supposed to have Jet Li in the movie, which is sort of what got my interest in the first place.
Yeah.
And then his deal kind of fell apart, and it was never quite the same after that. And we had to, we found, a very young, Jin Kazama. But there's a lot of good in the movie. But I'll tell you straight up, we had a 105-minute version of that movie, which is very coherent and very good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reasons, the producers decided they just kind of wanted to cut the fights together, and they ended up cutting it down to whatever it is, 88 minutes or something. And I was not happy, of course. So,
yeah.
So I went to the DGA and kind of kicked up my heels, and then a few scenes were put back in. But it's sometimes when there's a lot of creative conflict, and
mm-hmm.
it's not good, because you're better off with one person's point of view realized, right, for better or for worse,
Yeah.
than everybody, getting a little bit of they want, and then it starts becoming a bit of a mess. But I think the real problem was that as good as John Fu is in the movie,
Which I'll say, he is one of my favorite parts of it. I thought he was actually very good. As a fan of the video games, when I look at him, I see Jin Kazama.
I know, and that's what I felt too. I thought that he looked like Jin. He acted like he is in his own right a terrific martial artist. We did not double him really almost at all. So when you see those fights, I mean, that's him.
And those fights are great. It's like one of my favorite things. Like, video game movies kind of get a bad reputation, but for me, it's like, does it accomplish what it's supposed to accomplish? Which Tekken it has great fights, and the movie has great fights. So I really enjoy the movie.
I think there were two things working against this. One was that when you have fans of a video game, the movie, by definition, can't really do service to all the characters. And we had to make a decision. Look, we don't have time for a boxing kangaroo. We can't go down that supernatural road, because that's another movie. So we decided to make more of it's almost kind of a Rocky story of this guy, fighting, against this dystopian world, and I think so. Some people were upset because some of their favorite characters were not in the movie. That was one problem. We had a lot of blowback politically because John is Chinese and not Japanese, and I was very, very naive about this animosity between those two cultures, and Tekken is so completely perceived of as a Japanese, brand, I guess is the best way to put it, that it would, it was having to have a Chinese actor play this famous Japanese character. They got into the same trouble with Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, for Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, there was so much blowback that it kind of destroyed the movie's chances. So, in retrospect, I would have given more credence to, oh boy, we better have a Japanese lead in here.
Yeah.
But I just was sort of going with who I thought was best for the part. And I thought he looked exactly like him, and he was a great martial artist. And, there was a lot of good supporting actors in that movie. But, again, we got caught in a bunch of politics that really don't have to do with the movie. But there was reason for, I guess they call them the haters. There was reason for the haters to hate, because it wasn't really Tekken in the full, what I call the full boxing kangaroo
Yeah.
of it, and it had a Chinese, but here in this country we have, English people playing American icons all the time. I mean, we have Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis plays Lincoln, and there was a great actor, English actor, who played Martin Luther King, and it's not uncommon for other people to play American, historical figures. But it was just, that didn't go so well. There are things about the movie that I'm very, proud of. There are things about the way that it's edited that don't reflect my sensibility. So it is a frustrating movie for me, because every other movie I've made, is, all ego aside, really is a Dwight Little film, I have to say.
Yeah.
And whereas Tekken is not. Tekken was taken over by the producers and is not the movie we shot.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the edge of my seat knowing there's a longer version. That's something I wish I had the privilege to see. But, I will say that's unfortunate to hear that it kind of went that way. But, I am glad it was made. I enjoy it. I think the casting was really great all around. I think casting Cary Tagawa as Heihachi was genius, especially with his work on Mortal Kombat. And Ian Anthony Dale as Kazuya. Like, I really enjoyed those.
He was great, and some of the, I thought Brian Fury was terrific. Gary Daniels did a great job, and all these smaller parts. The guy who played Raven was right there, and Lateef Crowther did Eddie Gordo.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought the cast was nailed all the way around.
Yeah, they did. We had some actual MMA guys in there. If you want a martial arts fight movie, it certainly delivers.
Yeah, 100%. That's kind of our time. I want to really thank you for taking the time to do this. And, there's so much more I could sit here and sift through your movies and want to talk about. Like, we didn't get to touch on Halloween that much. And, I'm a big fan of that one. So,
when you have a chance to, check out Rapid Fire and check out this more recent one, Last Rampage.
Oh, I actually did see Last Rampage.
That's an interesting movie, isn't it?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm acquaintances with Alvaro, who wrote it. The same guy who introduced us. He introduced me to him as well.
Right. Well, Alvaro did an absolutely spectacular script for that, and it has some of the best dialogue I've ever been able to shoot. And you put Alvaro's words in Robert Patrick's mouth, and it's really. You can feel it.
Oh yeah, Robert Patrick he's like a genius. He's really great.
And he was really genuinely scary in that movie, I thought.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
So yeah, call me back if you wanna dive into Rapid Fire or dive deeper into Halloween if you want, but. So I'm around. If you want a part 2, we can figure that out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have your contact. I'd love to have you on again.
All right. Well, thanks for your interest. Thanks for checking in.
No problem. Thank you for coming on.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.